Thank you. I'm Zohra Rastegar, independent television journalist. You touched on my question. Although we see Hezbollah as unfavorable on the international scene and referred to as terrorists, but my question is that what is the view and perception of Lebanese inside Lebanon of Hezbollah, and what role Hezbollah actually has? You touched on it, but please elaborate if possible. Thank you.
It's like asking Americans what do they think of the Tea Party group. You'll get very different answers. They are different answers. I mean, the supporters of Hezbollah, obviously and genuinely, feel that it was the resistance movement that ended 22 years of real Israeli occupation of Lebanese land, which would not have ended without that resistance. That's an enormous accomplishment for the people who lived under occupation. Secondly, it's a very effective representative of their community, so it's their party. Thirdly, it is a heavily armed deterrent. Those who who look at it in that way, that it will deter and will make Israel think twice of attacking Lebanon again. Israel has invaded Lebanon many times and continues to overfly Lebanese airspace and sea space and all of that. So the supporters of it view it in that sense and look to Syrian and Iranian support for it as very welcome. Like, thank you very much for helping us defend our country. And they say, well, why didn't the Americans or the Saudis or somebody else arm the Lebanese army in a way that it could do this? So they thank the Syrians and the Iranians for doing this. Those are the supporters. Others, myself included, definitely acknowledge their role in liberation and so on of occupied territories. But I do think, as I've said very clearly, my view is unfortunately they are in the country indefinitely as a sovereign military and political force, which is effectively functioning as a proxy army for Syria and Iran. To my mind, they are not a deterrent, but if anything, they might attract an Israeli war. I think there are other ways at this point, after the Israeli withdrawal, to deal with maintaining security in the south of Lebanon through politics, through the Lebanese army and other means. My view, which is maybe the view of many Lebanese as well, is that unfortunately Lebanon is stuck in this regional game and will pay the price again and again because I think Iran and Syria and maybe Israel don't mind if Lebanon is destroyed again, as long as Syria is not attacked, as long as Iran is not attacked. And so very different views of where Hezbollah is. Now, there was an attempt, and is an attempt, in what's called the National Dialogue Conference, which is presided by the president, to find common ground between Hezbollah's military doctrine and situation and other parties in the country. That attempt is going nowhere. Those on one side say, well, Hezbollah, thank you for all the resistance, and you have an amazing deterrent capacity, but let's find a way to integrate it within the Lebanese state, Lebanese government, Lebanese army, maybe as a civil defense league or something. But it mustn't be an independent decision maker on war and peace. And Hezbollah effectively shows no interest in going in that direction. So attempts to deal with it, but it's not going anywhere.
Okay, we've got a lot of questions, so we'll do two at a time. There's a gentleman here, and then this gentleman in the back here. So
Hi.
You first, and then you, and hopefully you can handle two questions.
Dan Freifeld, New York University. To piggyback on the last question, to what extent has perception of Hezbollah changed since the July war among communities who would otherwise be least inclined to support or to look favorably upon a Shia religious group? And sort of Michel Aoun aside, particularly in Jaja's people and in the north and in Sunni communities, has the perception of Hezbollah changed since the July
2006 war?
Yes.
The July 2006.
And particularly, towards a more favorable disposition. The second question is, have there been any consequences for this shift in U.S. support or prioritization of Lebanon and the Lebanese project from the Bush administration to the Obama administration, and that traditionally when the U.S. or other outside power sponsor groups in the Middle East and then withdraw that support, there's some retributive, there usually are some consequences for those groups. So has that all happened in Lebanon, or is there truly like a sort of reconciliation spirit from the erstwhile victors? Thanks.
Okay, gentleman here.
Patrick Vibert, Foreign Policy Association. I guess when you give a talk about Lebanon, you run the risk of everyone asking about Hezbollah. But that being said, have you noticed any conflict between the what you call the Iranian deployment in the party and the domestic Lebanese political party, as far as the leadership is concerned? Is there any conflict between we want to be a more like responsible representative of the Shia and with conflict with being a proxy in two other states' battles?
Mm-hmm. The 2006 war and the impact on the image of Hezbollah, I think, had an enormous impact. That before the 2006 war, although some in Lebanon, were disagreed with its approach and so on, and the debate particularly became relevant after the Israeli withdrawal in 2000. That people said, great, wonderful achievement, Hezbollah, now is the time to begin to disarm and integrate and so on. And it became clear that Hezbollah wasn't going to do that, and that raised a political debate in Lebanon. But as long as Hezbollah wasn't bringing harm to Lebanon, it was, political discussion. What happened in 2006, particularly that it seemed to be the result of a Hezbollah attack on July 12, had enormous consequences. And those who were calmly disagreeing with Hezbollah over its policy became bitterly angry and very hostile that Hezbollah's policies had taken Lebanon into a very, very devastating war. It also came at a time when there was external encouragement from the U.S. and so to go at it, to really go after Hezbollah. So the 2006 war really lost for Hezbollah. About half of the Lebanese population became sort of committed against it in a way because it affected their lives very, very directly. It also had a big effect on the Shiite community itself, which, although it fully supports Hezbollah and the leadership of Nasrallah, and that was reinforced in the war, the fact that the community paid such a devastating price for this war that seemed unnecessary and seemed, that they had stumbled into, is something that weighs heavily on the party today and on any calculations of a future war. You can't keep doing that for stumbling into another devastating war. So yes, the 2006 war really changed the dynamics for Hezbollah and continues to be the case, so much so that in a sense Hezbollah had to go onto the streets in Beirut in 2008 to say, look, we're not going anywhere, and this is the way it's going to be. Now, the shift in U.S. prioritization definitely affected Lebanon very much. It wasn't a simple, shift of priorities vis-a-vis Lebanon. It's what happened to U.S., or, the height of Bush policy in Iraq, with Iran, in Afghanistan, with Syria, and in Lebanon. It was a whole collection of things which ended up with U.S. beginning to withdraw, abandoning many of its projects, and not being able to achieve many of them. So it wasn't so much that the U.S. abandoned Lebanon sort of out of the blue. It was that whole retrenchment and sort of the failure of the neocon Bush project, which some in Lebanon had really banked on. And when it failed, and when the U.S. turned and went in another direction, they are obvious losers. And particularly the March 14 movement and Walid Jumblat and the Prime Minister, Saad al-Hariri, have had to swallow a lot of very, very difficult and very bitter climb downs and make peace with enemies that they accuse of murder in their own families. So very, very difficult.